The galaxy had long heard of the Vorthon Dominion. They were a race of conquerors feared across hundreds of star systems. Their warships were massive, gleaming with alloys that no ordinary weapon could pierce. Entire civilizations fell before them without a fight, surrendering almost immediately when the Dominion arrived in orbit. Their reputation for invincibility was unmatched, and any who opposed them usually faced total annihilation. When the Dominion fleet appeared at the edge of the solar system, carrying hundreds of vessels that stretched across millions of kilometers, every species that had ever encountered them knew what was coming. But Earth was different. Humanity didn't tremble, didn't send surrender messages, and didn't even try to hide. Instead, they prepared. For decades, humans had been quietly preparing for the day the Dominion would arrive. While the galaxy laughed at Earth, labeling it a primitive, fragile world, the United Terran Command had been turning every advantage into a secret weapon. Lunar mines had been converted into hidden weapons foundries. Asteroid belts were hollowed out to form secret shipyards, and underground facilities across Earth had been stockpiling components for ships, weapons and technologies the Dominion could not imagine. They studied every failed defense from the past, every empire that had fallen before the Vorthons, and realized that the key to survival was not just building stronger armor or bigger lasers. Humans were determined to use creativity, physics, and surprise as their weapons. The Dominion fleet approached, massive and confident. The lead admiral aboard their flagship, the Vorthon Glory, transmitted a message across the solar system. "Surrender now, primitive beings," it boomed through the void. "Your defenses are weak. Resistance is futile. Comply, and your extinction will be swift." On Earth, the message played across screens in government and military command centers. Citizens watched, their hearts pounding, but there was no panic. Captain Elias Ward, commanding one of Earth's hidden orbital defense fleets, heard the message in the calm, measured voice he had perfected over years of training. He didn't shout orders or panic. He simply turned to his crew and said, "Let's show them why we didn't surrender." The crew exchanged glances. They had trained for this moment, their lives dedicated to defending humanity, often knowing the odds were impossible. But Elias's confidence was contagious. He gave the first command: "Prepare the railguns for deployment. Power levels at maximum. Targeting sequence ready." The term railgun sounded archaic to the Dominion. In their history, projectiles were considered outdated. Beam weapons, plasma cannons, and fusion torpedoes were modern warfare. Humanity's railguns, giant kinetic weapons that could fire metal slugs at a fraction of light speed, were considered a relic by the galaxy. But here, on Earth's side, they were about to become the most feared weapons the Dominion had ever faced. As the Dominion fleet entered the asteroid belt bordering Mars, the humans revealed their first trap. Asteroids that seemed natural suddenly split apart, opening massive cavities inside. From these hidden chambers emerged the railgun arrays, towering structures built to dwarf even the largest Dominion destroyers. Each gun was a marvel of human engineering. Compact fusion cores provided immense energy, while precision targeting systems, assisted by quantum calculations, ensured that no shot missed. The Dominion sensors tried to detect threats, but the humans had mastered stealth and misdirection. The massive guns seemed invisible until it was already too late. The first volley of slugs was silent at first, merely streaks of metal crossing millions of kilometers of empty space. Then the impact came. The lead ship, Vorthon Glory, was struck squarely on its midsection. The armor, which had been touted as unbreakable, crumpled under the sheer kinetic energy. Decks collapsed, energy conduits exploded, and the crew inside had no time to react. The explosion didn't just damage the ship, it tore through it, disintegrating entire sections in an instant. The Dominion flagship sent out an alarm signal, but the damage was catastrophic. Their formation, which relied on each ship protecting the others, began to collapse. Across the belt, other human ships fired in sequence, creating a barrage of relentless projectiles. Each strike was calculated, timed to hit vulnerable points in the enemy's design. The Dominion fleet had prepared for a direct assault, but they had not anticipated the humans' ingenuity. Their ships, massive and heavily reinforced, were too slow to maneuver out of the way. Slugs struck armor plate after armor plate, tearing holes and sending debris spinning into the void. Captains aboard Dominion vessels shouted orders, but their systems were already compromised. Their supposedly invincible fleet was suddenly fragile. On board the Vorthan Glory, panic spread among the crew. Commander Lyra, the second in command, observed the devastation through her tactical screens. She had studied hundreds of battles and considered herself a master strategist, but the humans had rewritten the rules of engagement. "What kind of weapons are these?" she demanded, her voice shaking. Scientists in her command room tried to explain, but the words didn't make sense. "They're metal rods fired at incredible speed, no energy signature, unstoppable." Lyra realized that she had underestimated humans. They had not relied on the brute force technology the Dominion valued, but on something far more dangerous: cleverness, speed, and surprise. Back on Earth, humans watched through sensors and communication arrays. Scientists and engineers had spent decades calculating the perfect combination of speed, mass, and trajectory. What they had built was simple in concept, but devastating in effect. A single railgun slug could carry the energy of a small bomb, and when combined with dozens of simultaneous firings, it became a storm that no shield could withstand. Captain Elias and his officers observed the Dominion fleet in awe, not at fear, but at the realization that years of preparation had paid off. Every prediction, every calculation, every hidden base and weapon was working perfectly. The Dominion vessels began to retreat in disarray, trying to regroup, but the humans had anticipated this. Even as ships turned to flee, the railguns fired again and again, intercepting them at every attempt. The battle was not about honor or glory, it was about survival. Humanity had learned that when faced with a superior force, cleverness, preparation, and determination could level the playing field. Each destroyed cruiser, each torn hole in the enemy formation, was a lesson that the Dominion would carry forever. The galaxy underestimated humans at their peril. By the time the first skirmish ended, the Dominion had suffered heavy losses. Their flagship barely held together, and the survivors were scattered. Messages sent back to their empire described the horror they had faced. A species that seemed fragile, technologically primitive, had shattered their invincible fleet with simple metal rods traveling at unimaginable speed. Across the galaxy, those who had previously mocked humanity would hear the tale, and some would tremble. On Earth, there was quiet celebration. No one danced or cheered, this was only the beginning. Captain Elias stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the scorched remnants of the asteroid belt, knowing that the war was far from over. But humanity had made its first mark. They had shown that even against an empire thought unbeatable, courage, intelligence, and preparation could turn the tide. The Vorthons had come expecting easy victory. Instead, they encountered something they had never calculated: human ingenuity in action, and the first proof that the defenders of Earth would not surrender, no matter how powerful the enemy appeared. The battle had begun, and humanity had made it clear: underestimating them would be the greatest mistake any galactic empire could ever make. The Dominion fleet had suffered its first devastating loss, and yet it was far from defeated. From their shattered flagship, the surviving admirals scrambled to reorganize. The Vorthons had never faced a species that could defy them with such precision and brutal effectiveness. Their pride was wounded, and their fury grew with every lost cruiser. Commander Lyra stood on the bridge of the crippled Vorthan Glory, her eyes scanning the tactical displays with growing disbelief. Every prediction she had made about humanity's capabilities had been wrong. "They're firing metal rods," her chief science officer said again, voice trembling. "They travel at incredible speed. No energy signature. They ignore our armor completely." The Dominion fleet, known across galaxies for its disciplined formations and advanced weaponry, was now in chaos. Ships that were once perfectly aligned for coordinated attacks were scattered, struggling to maintain integrity as they tried to regroup. Lyra realized that their heavy armor, which had kept countless enemies at bay, had become their weakness. It was slow, cumbersome, and no match for the relentless velocity of human projectiles. The Dominion's communication channels buzzed with panic, officers shouting orders, trying to issue counterattacks that would never reach their targets. Their energy weapons, designed to vaporize opponents at a distance, were useless. Humanity had exploited a blind spot in Dominion strategy: speed, simplicity, and surprise. Meanwhile, Captain Elias Ward and his fleet continued their precision assault from hidden positions in the asteroid belt. Humans had prepared not just one trap, but a network of defenses. Each railgun emplacement was positioned to maximize coverage, and every shot was calculated to hit the weakest points of enemy armor. The Dominion ships could not escape. Each time they tried to maneuver, they were met with slugs traveling at incredible velocities, each impact tearing apart their reinforced plating. Sparks, metal fragments, and twisted hulls floated silently in the void, testimony to human ingenuity and discipline. The Dominion commanders began to grasp the true scale of what they faced. They had come expecting a primitive civilization, unprepared and easy to crush. They had assumed humans would cower behind shields, surrender quickly, or flee. Instead, humanity had stood its ground, using its understanding of physics as a weapon. The Vorthons had relied on complex technologies, shields that consumed enormous energy and heavily armored hulls. They had never considered that simple kinetic energy, properly harnessed, could reduce their mightiest vessels to debris in minutes. Lyra's officers exchanged grim looks, realizing that the enemy's ingenuity had outmatched even their best war strategies. On board the Dominion's lead ships, confusion reigned. Sensors and targeting systems, which were among the most advanced in the galaxy, failed to track the human projectiles until it was too late. Officers shouted as their armor collapsed under repeated impacts. Entire sections of ships ripped apart in instant explosions. The humans had calculated everything: timing, angle, velocity. Nothing the Dominion threw back could match it. And yet, from Earth's side, the assault seemed almost effortless. Captain Elias watched the battle unfold with calm focus. He knew that each railgun shot was a story of countless engineers, scientists, and soldiers working together for decades. This was more than a battle. It was the proof that preparation, strategy, and courage could topple the most formidable opponent. In orbit around Mars, the human command centers monitored the engagement in real time. Scientists studied the telemetry with fascination, noting how the railgun slugs punched through layers of armor, how even the Dominion's most advanced shields buckled under the impact. Engineers adjusted trajectories mid-flight, ensuring maximum efficiency and minimum waste of ammunition. For the first time in their history, humans were teaching the galaxy's most feared empire a lesson in warfare they could not anticipate. Even the youngest cadets watching the battle from their training consoles felt the weight of history in their hands. Humanity was no longer just defending itself. It was redefining what it meant to survive against impossible odds. The Dominion's fleet tried to mount a counteroffensive, firing plasma and energy beams at the positions they had identified. But the human ships were nimble, coordinating with one another through advanced communication networks, dodging what could only be described as desperate attacks. Every time a Dominion ship fired, the humans calculated angles, velocities, and distances, and railgun slugs struck before the enemy could even register the threat. What was meant to intimidate them became futile. The Dominion armor, reinforced with layers of alloy designed to withstand centuries of attacks, was proving useless. Every strike that failed to destroy a vessel caused damage that slowed it down, reduced maneuverability, and made it even more vulnerable to the next shot. Commander Lyra watched the carnage in disbelief. She had faced hundreds of planets, civilizations, and fleets, yet she had never seen anything like this. One by one, her ships were being shredded, their systems failing faster than repairs could be made. Panic rippled through her command chain. Officers argued over tactics, shouted warnings, and tried to rally forces, but nothing worked. Each human strike was more than a weapon. It was a message. Underestimating humanity was a fatal error. Back on Earth, humans did not celebrate their first victories with fanfare. There was no cheering or bravado. The people understood the gravity of what they had done. Every destroyed Dominion ship represented lives saved. Every calculated strike a moment of triumph against a foe that had never known defeat. Captain Elias and his officers focused on the next stage. The battle was far from over. The Dominion fleet was scattered, but it was still large, and they would not give up easily. Humanity's next moves had to be precise, strategic, and relentless. As the first battle ended, the Dominion fleet began to retreat toward the outer edges of the solar system. But the damage was done. Reports transmitted back to the Dominion homeworld described a species they had assumed primitive and powerless, tearing apart their invincible fleet with weapons they dismissed as archaic. Every officer, every admiral, and every strategist who had ever doubted humans now faced the terrifying reality. Earth's defenders were not just clever, they were unstoppable when united, inventive and unafraid. Captain Elias stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the retreating enemy through the observation window. Space was littered with the silent remains of the Dominion vessels, debris reflecting distant starlight. He felt no triumph, only determination. This was only the beginning. Humanity had proven that strategy, preparation, and courage could overcome even the most terrifying force in the galaxy. The Vorthons had learned a lesson they would never forget. Speed, intelligence, and ingenuity could defeat even the strongest armor. In the quiet aftermath, as humans repaired their positions and recalibrated their weapons, analysts studied every destroyed ship, every miscalculated maneuver, and every point of weakness in the Dominion tactics. Each data point was a treasure, each victory a lesson. Captain Elias spoke to his crew, reminding them that this was not just a war of weapons but of minds. "We are not the strongest because of our ships," he said. "We are the strongest because we never stop thinking, never stop preparing, and never give up. That is what makes us human." Even as the Dominion fleet retreated, humanity knew this would not be the last confrontation. But for now, Earth had held. Humans had faced an empire of fearsome conquerors and emerged victorious, not through sheer size or energy weapons, but through cleverness, precision, and the unshakable will to survive. The galaxy would take notice. Stories would be told of the first engagement, of how a few hidden railguns and a brave fleet had shredded what was thought unbreakable. And somewhere deep in space, the Dominion commanders whispered in disbelief, knowing they had underestimated a species that refused to surrender and would not be defeated. The aftermath of the first engagement left the Dominion fleet shaken to its core. Ships that had once projected absolute power were now drifting wrecks, their decks twisted and their systems failing. Commander Lyra, aboard what remained of the Vorthon glory, stared at the tactical displays in stunned silence. Their formations, which had been precise and unstoppable for centuries, had been shattered by a species they considered primitive. The humans had done something they could not predict. They had fought with intelligence, strategy, and a courage that defied expectation. Lyra realized that the very strengths that had built their empire, their massive, heavily reinforced ships, their complex energy weapons, their pride in invincibility, had become weaknesses against this unexpected enemy. Meanwhile, on Earth, Captain Elias Ward coordinated the defense with calm efficiency. Humans had learned that the Dominion was not invincible, and each new attack or maneuver by the alien fleet was met with preparation. The railguns, simple in concept but devastating in execution, continued to fire with pinpoint accuracy. Their projectiles, traveling at extraordinary velocities, tore through Vorthon armor as though it were paper. The Dominion's reactive shields, designed to counter energy attacks, had no effect against these slugs. Each impact tore apart hulls, destroyed propulsion systems, and left the enemy scrambling for cover. As the Dominion fleet tried to regroup, it became clear how unprepared they were for humanity's approach. The human strategy was not just about shooting first or hitting harder. It was about using the environment and the enemy's expectations against them. Asteroids became cover and obstacles for humans, but traps for the Dominion. Firing positions were hidden until the last possible moment, giving the Vorthons the illusion that their escape routes were open. By the time they realized the humans' true positions, railgun slugs had already struck, cutting ships in half or sending them spinning helplessly into the void. On board one of the larger Dominion cruisers, panic spread quickly. Officers shouted orders to fire, to maneuver, to shield themselves from attacks that seemed to come from nowhere. Sensors tried to track the projectiles, but they moved too fast with no energy signature, making them invisible until impact. Ships were torn apart before they could even respond. The Dominion crew had been trained to face the worst of the galaxy, yet here they were, completely overwhelmed by an enemy that appeared almost fragile by comparison. Commander Lyra's voice shook as she tried to maintain control. "Focus on their positions. Target their weapons," she ordered. But the humans had already moved, striking with methodical precision. Every attempt to predict the next human attack failed. The Dominion scientists aboard their surviving ships tried to analyze what had happened. They had studied every known species and every known technology, yet humans had broken every rule they thought applied. "It's not magic," one officer admitted, voice tight with fear. "It's pure physics. They have mastered it in ways we cannot anticipate. This was a horrifying realization. The Vorthons had relied on layers of advanced technology, believing that complexity and power alone could win battles. Humans, by contrast, had relied on understanding the fundamentals of speed, mass, and impact. Their projectiles were simple but unstoppable. The Dominion had been defeated not by clever machines or exotic energy sources, but by ingenuity and relentless preparation. In the midst of the chaos, human ships continued to advance. Captain Elias Ward coordinated attacks with near-perfect timing. Every railgun shot was calculated to strike weak points, every maneuver designed to exploit the enemy's overconfidence. His fleet moved like a predator, using discipline and teamwork to overwhelm the Dominion's confusion. Human engineers monitored each projectile's trajectory, adjusting in real time to ensure maximum damage. This level of precision made every attack devastating, and the Dominion's efforts to recover were futile. The Dominion's pride was wounded. Ships designed to withstand centuries of attack were now reduced to fragments. Energy shields that had defeated entire civilizations were powerless. Crew members who had never known fear now faced the terrifying truth. They had underestimated humanity. Reports were sent across the fleet, each one echoing the same sentiment. We cannot match their speed. We cannot pierce their defense. Our weapons are useless. Commander Lyra realized that retreat might be their only option, but even retreat was dangerous. Human railguns could reach them at extreme distances, and the positions from which the humans fired were unknown. Any move could be fatal. Back on Earth, human scientists celebrated quietly. This was not triumphalism, but recognition of the sheer effectiveness of their preparation. Every success, every destroyed cruiser, every incapacitated ship proved that their decades of effort had been worth it. Captain Elias understood that the battle was not just about weapons. It was about outthinking an opponent. Humans had faced overwhelming odds, yet through discipline, strategy, and courage, they had turned the tide. Each officer on his bridge knew that the enemy would not underestimate them again, and that this war would continue to test their limits. The Dominion fleet, scattered and battered, began to retreat toward the outer regions of the solar system. But their losses were catastrophic. Ships that had been at the forefront of their empire were gone, shredded by weapons they could not defend against. Communications with the homeworld described a species that had defied expectation and destroyed what had been considered indestructible. Across the galaxy, news of this engagement would spread. Stories of the humans' first battle against the Dominion would terrify those who had previously dismissed Earth as insignificant. Within the Dominion fleet, morale collapsed. Officers argued, blamed one another, and tried to reorganize, but the damage was irreversible. Even the most seasoned admirals could not deny the reality. Humans had not only defeated their fleet, but had also demonstrated a level of intelligence and preparation that challenged centuries of Dominion dominance. Commander Lyra, once confident and commanding, now understood that her species' assumptions had been their downfall. Humans had taken advantage of simplicity and speed in a way that no one had predicted, proving that raw power alone was not enough to conquer the galaxy. On Earth, preparations continued. While the first engagement had been a success, everyone knew that the Dominion would return stronger, smarter, and more cautious. Captain Elias and his officers used the data from the battle to refine strategies, improve railgun accuracy, and prepare for future confrontations. Engineers worked tirelessly to ensure that every weapon, every ship, and every crew member was ready. The humans understood that victory was not guaranteed, but their courage and ingenuity gave them an edge. They had faced the impossible and survived. As the Dominion fleet retreated, the humans watched silently. Space was littered with debris from destroyed ships, twisted metal reflecting the cold light of distant stars. Each fragment told a story of careful planning, bravery, and the relentless pursuit of survival. Captain Elias reflected on the battle and realized that humanity had achieved something remarkable. They had faced an empire that had never known defeat and had won through intelligence, teamwork, and determination. The galaxy had underestimated them, and now humans had proven that they could not be ignored. The first battle against the Dominion had changed everything. It was no longer a fight for survival alone. It was a demonstration that humans could stand against the greatest powers in the galaxy. Commander Lyra, retreating with the remnants of her fleet, would carry the memory of this defeat for the rest of her life. She understood that humans were more than their ships or weapons. They were clever, resourceful, and fearless in ways the Dominion had never anticipated. Humanity, on the other hand, did not rest on its success. They repaired, regrouped, and prepared for the next encounter. Each victory was a lesson, each destroyed enemy ship a reminder of what could be achieved with focus and strategy. The first engagement had proven one thing. When humans fought, they fought not just with machines, but with their minds, their courage, and an unshakable will to survive. The Dominion had learned a harsh lesson, and the galaxy would remember it. Captain Elias stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the retreating Dominion ships. He knew that the battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Humanity had shown that they could face overwhelming odds and emerge victorious, and that alone sent a message across the stars. Earth would not surrender, and underestimating its defenders was a fatal mistake. The Dominion had retreated, but their fury and determination only grew. Commander Lyra and the surviving officers spent weeks analyzing every piece of data from the first battle. They pored over scans, damage reports, and debris patterns, desperate to understand how humans had so completely shattered their supposedly invincible fleet. Every theory they had relied on was wrong. The humans had not used energy weapons, beams, or fancy shields. They had relied on speed, kinetic force, and precision, simple in concept, deadly in execution. Every plan the Dominion had relied on, every assumption about their superiority, had been overturned by a species they had dismissed as primitive. Back on Earth, the mood was cautious triumph. Captain Elias Ward and his officers did not celebrate the victory. They knew the Dominion would return, smarter, stronger, and ready for revenge. Human scientists and engineers worked tirelessly to improve their railgun systems, analyze enemy ship designs, and prepare new strategies. Every asteroid, moon, and orbital station became a potential defensive position. Every hidden railgun emplacement a deadly surprise. They refined targeting algorithms, enhanced projectile speed, and even began experimenting with larger, more devastating ammunition. Every detail was calculated to ensure that when the Dominion returned, they would face an enemy even more prepared than before. Weeks later, the Dominion struck again. This time they had learned from their previous defeat. Their ships were reinforced with thicker armor, reactive plating, and faster engines designed to dodge projectiles. They had reorganized their fleet formations, improved communications, and studied human tactics to anticipate their strategies. The second attack was larger than the first, a desperate attempt to reclaim their honor and destroy Earth's defenses before humans could grow even stronger. They believed they had adapted. They believed they could win this time. The humans, however, were ready. In orbit around Jupiter, a massive railgun array called Station Typhon came online for the first time. It was a ring-like structure around one of Jupiter's moons, designed to fire projectiles with unmatched speed and accuracy. From this distance, the Dominion ships appeared as tiny specks, but the humans had calculated trajectories down to the last millimeter. When the first salvo was fired, the impact was catastrophic. A single projectile pierced the lead Vorthan dreadnought clean through, exploding on contact and destroying 5 nearby escort ships in the blast. The Dominion fleet, confident in their reinforcements and new technology, was stunned. They had believed their upgraded ships and weapons would make them untouchable, yet humans had outdone themselves again. Captain Elias coordinated the human fleet with quiet precision. Every ship moved in perfect formation, covering weaknesses, protecting one another, and maximizing firepower. The railguns fired in coordinated waves, each shot calculated to strike at critical points of enemy armor and engines. Dominion ships tried to maneuver, evade, and counterattack, but the humans anticipated every move. Even the Dominion's fastest vessels could not escape the relentless barrage. Each impact caused massive damage, slowing ships, damaging systems, and leaving them vulnerable to the next volley. The second battle had become not just a fight for survival, but a demonstration of human mastery of strategy and precision. On board the Dominion's lead ships, panic spread faster than ever. Commander Lyra barked orders demanding evasive maneuvers, counterattacks, and shields raised to maximum capacity. Yet every attempt to regroup was met with destruction. The human projectiles struck with terrifying accuracy, each impact crippling engines, weapons, and defensive systems. The Vorthans, for the first time in centuries, faced an enemy they could not outgun, outmaneuver, or outthink in conventional ways. Humans had proven that cleverness, preparation, and discipline could defeat even the mightiest fleet in the galaxy. The Dominion scientists worked frantically, trying to find a solution. Every conventional defense failed. Reactive armor was shredded, energy shields were useless against the high-speed slugs, and evasive maneuvers could not escape the calculated paths of human projectiles. Their pride and confidence had been shattered once again. Reports sent back to their homeworld were grim. Humanity was not just surviving, they were dominating. "We cannot win using conventional methods," one officer admitted. "They are faster, smarter, and more prepared than we imagined." Despite their fear, the humans maintained calm control. Captain Elias watched the battlefield with focus, coordinating attacks and predicting enemy maneuvers. Engineers on Earth and in orbit adjusted firing sequences in real time, ensuring that every shot would hit its target. Communication between human ships was seamless, their strategies adaptive and flexible. Unlike the Dominion, whose confidence had been shattered by the first battle, humans remained focused, disciplined, and relentless. Every projectile fired was part of a greater plan, a plan to teach the invaders that Earth would not surrender. The Dominion fleet began to suffer catastrophic losses again. One by one, dreadnoughts, cruisers, and support ships were shredded, torn apart, or disabled. Explosions lit the void as projectiles tore through decks and armor. The Dominion's formations broke apart entirely, leaving scattered survivors who struggled to escape the human onslaught. Commander Lyra realized that retreat might be the only option left, but even that was perilous. Human projectiles had extreme range, and the firing positions were unknown. Any attempt to flee risked immediate destruction. Back on Earth, humans worked tirelessly to repair and reload railguns, ensuring that they could continue to strike with deadly accuracy. Captain Elias spoke to his officers quietly, reminding them that focus and preparation were as important as courage. "Every shot counts," he said. "Every strike we make protects our world. We do this not out of fear, but because it is the right thing to do. We are humanity, and we never back down." His words inspired calm determination in the crew, reinforcing their focus and discipline. As the battle raged, Dominion officers sent messages to their homeworld describing the devastation. Entire fleets had been shredded by weapons they had dismissed as primitive. Their pride shaken, and their confidence in victory destroyed. They realized humans were unlike any enemy they had faced before. Commander Lyra whispered to her officers, "They are not just weapons. They are thinkers. Every move is calculated. They are unpredictable and unstoppable when united." For the first time, the Dominion truly feared humanity. By the end of the second engagement, the Dominion fleet was in ruins. Retreating into the outer regions of the solar system, the survivors carried with them the knowledge of a species that had defied every expectation. Humanity had not only defended itself but had proven that preparation, courage, and intelligence could overcome even the most powerful invader. The humans' railguns had become legendary in a matter of days, a symbol of ingenuity and relentless determination. On Earth, scientists and engineers analyzed the battle with careful attention. Every destroyed Dominion ship, every failed maneuver, every unexpected tactic became data to improve future defenses. Humans understood that the Dominion would return again, stronger and more determined, but they were ready. Every railgun, every ship, and every crew member was prepared to face the next challenge. Humanity had learned that survival required more than bravery. It required strategy, discipline, and innovation. Captain Elias stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the remnants of the Dominion fleet retreat. Space was littered with twisted hulls and drifting debris, each a reminder of the cost of underestimating humanity. He understood that the war was far from over, but for the first time the humans had shown the galaxy that Earth was not to be dismissed. They had proven that determination, intelligence, and teamwork could defeat even the mightiest foe. The Dominion's defeat sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Empires that had long dismissed humans as weak began to take notice. Stories spread of how a single planet had shattered what was thought invincible, using ingenuity and courage rather than raw firepower. Humanity had earned respect, fear, and a reputation that would endure for generations. Even as the Dominion retreated, humans did not rest. They repaired, upgraded, and prepared for the next confrontation. Each victory was a lesson. each engagement a demonstration of what could be achieved through intelligence, focus, and bravery. Captain Elias reminded his crew, "We fight not just with weapons, but with our minds and hearts. That is what makes us strong." The lesson was clear. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, and that mistake would never be repeated. The Dominion had retreated once again, leaving behind a trail of destroyed ships and shattered pride. Commander Lyra and her surviving officers were forced to report back to their homeworld, carrying the grim news that humanity had not only survived, but had outmatched their fleet twice in succession. Across the galaxy, whispers spread among alien civilizations. Earth was no longer a weak planet, but a force capable of shaking even the most powerful empires. The Dominion, who had long been considered unstoppable, had learned a lesson they would never forget. On Earth, there was cautious relief. Captain Elias Ward and his officers knew that the war was not fully over, but the decisive nature of the last engagement had shown that humans could face any threat with preparation, intelligence, and courage. Across command centers, engineers, scientists, and crew members repaired damaged ships, reloaded railguns, and upgraded systems based on lessons from both battles. Every destroyed Dominion vessel became a study, a blueprint for anticipating future attacks. Humanity was no longer reacting. They were planning, preparing, and improving with each encounter. The Dominion fleet had assumed that retreat would allow them to recover and return stronger. They reinforced ships with heavier armor, faster engines, and advanced shielding, believing these upgrades would make them invincible. But humans had already adapted beyond what the Dominion expected. The railgun arrays were upgraded, larger projectiles were prepared, and targeting algorithms were refined to hit even more accurately. Each weapon, each ship, each crew member was prepared not just to survive, but to dominate if the Dominion returned. Humanity had learned that wars were not won by firepower alone. They were won by thinking ahead, using strategy, and exploiting the enemy's weaknesses. Months passed, and humanity strengthened its defenses across the solar system. Orbital stations, hidden in asteroid belts, and massive arrays like Station Typhon became symbols of human ingenuity and persistence. Every weapon placement, every new defensive position was carefully calculated. Captain Elias coordinated drills and simulations with his officers to ensure that no surprise could catch them unprepared. Each day, humans trained not only in combat, but in the art of thinking faster, predicting enemy moves, and adapting instantly. The Dominion's previous victories against countless civilizations had no relevance here. Humans were different. They were unpredictable, determined, and relentlessly creative. Finally, the Dominion dared to send a delegation to Earth, under a flag of truce, to understand the planet that had humiliated them twice. They expected to find arrogance or fear, perhaps a species trembling before their might. Instead, they encountered calm, confident humans, who had continued their work of exploring space, strengthening defenses, and building for the future. Captain Elias met with the alien commanders, including Commander Lyra, in a neutral orbital station. There was no animosity in his tone, only quiet authority. "You reinforced your ships," he said, "but you never reinforced your thinking." Lyra, still shaken by her defeats, understood the weight of his words. Humans had won not by brute force, but by using their minds, preparation, and courage. The Dominion returned home in silence, their pride shattered and their confidence shaken. Their empire, which had never been defeated so decisively, had seen what a species they considered primitive could accomplish. Every officer, every strategist, and every soldier who had doubted Earth now faced the terrifying reality. Humans were formidable, and their strength came not just from weapons, but from intelligence, adaptability, and the will to survive. Across the galaxy, empires took notice. Humans had proven that courage, preparation, and creativity could defy the impossible. Back on Earth, life returned to a quieter rhythm, but vigilance never faded. Humans repaired, upgraded, and expanded their defenses, always preparing for the next threat. Captain Elias continued to oversee operations, ensuring that the lessons learned from every battle were applied to future strategies. Engineers studied Dominion ship designs, scientists improved projectile velocity and accuracy, and officers trained tirelessly. Humanity had learned that survival in the galaxy required constant adaptation, planning, and the ability to innovate under pressure. The first two battles against the Dominion had changed everything. Humans had demonstrated that a small, determined planet could defend itself against the galaxy's most feared empire. Stories of these victories spread, not just among humans but among alien civilizations as well. The galaxy began to recognize that Earth was a force to be respected, a species capable of surviving and thriving against overwhelming odds. Humans had redefined what it meant to fight with intelligence, courage, and creativity. Captain Elias often reflected on what had happened. He knew that humanity's strength was not measured by the size of their ships or the power of their weapons, but by their unity, intelligence, and determination. Humans had faced an enemy they could not overpower in conventional ways, and had used their minds to outthink, outmaneuver, and ultimately outlast them. The victories were a testament to the human spirit, a reminder that courage and ingenuity could overcome even the most formidable obstacles. Years later, humanity continued to explore space, confident but cautious. They had no desire to conquer other civilizations, but they understood the importance of being prepared. The railguns, once simple weapons, had become legendary. They symbolized the combination of science, determination, and strategy that allowed humans to survive and thrive. Humanity's reputation had grown across the stars, a reminder to any who might underestimate them. Earth's defenders were clever, resilient, and never to be dismissed. Even as new technologies were developed and humans expanded their reach into the stars, the story of the battles against the Dominion remained central. Young cadets studied the strategies, scientists analyzed the engineering, and officers learned from every tactical decision made during those critical moments. The lessons of preparation, discipline, and ingenuity became part of humanity's culture, a permanent reminder that strength was as much about mind as it was about weaponry. Commander Lyra, years after her defeat, would speak quietly to her officers about Earth, describing a species that had shattered their expectations and rewritten the rules of engagement. She acknowledged, with reluctant respect, that humans had not won through luck or raw power, but through preparation, strategy, and the courage to act decisively under pressure. The memory of those battles remained a warning to her people. Underestimate humanity at your own peril. Back on Earth, Captain Elias stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the stars beyond. Humanity had survived an empire that was thought unbeatable, had defended their planet, and had proven their place in the galaxy. He knew that the future would bring new challenges, new threats, and new battles, but he was confident. Humans were ready, not just with weapons, but with minds, courage, and unity. The galaxy had learned to respect them, and humanity had learned the value of preparation, strategy, and unwavering determination. The battles against the Dominion had ended, but the legacy of humanity's victory endured. Across the stars, civilizations whispered of a small planet that had faced the most powerful empire and had prevailed. Humans did not claim glory or dominance. They continued to innovate, explore, and protect their world. The lesson of Earth was clear: preparation, intelligence, and courage could overcome even the greatest of challenges, and a determined species could redefine the rules of the galaxy. In the quiet of deep space, human ships tested new railguns, explored distant stars, and maintained a vigilant watch for threats. Humanity had no desire to conquer, but they would never surrender. The galaxy now knew that Earth's defenders were formidable, and that even the most powerful empire could be challenged by courage, preparation, and ingenuity. The story of the Railgun War had become legend, a symbol of the power of the human spirit and the unshakable will to survive, and so, humanity continued, ready for the unknown, confident in their abilities and proud of the victories they had earned. The Dominion had learned that even the most reinforced warships could be destroyed by determination, intelligence, and strategy. The galaxy had learned that humans were not to be underestimated, and Earth, quiet but vigilant, looked to the stars, knowing that if any enemy ever returned, humanity would be ready.